Guys, it is great to see your beautiful faces again. It's another Friday, it's another Tech Talk, and Mike has got a beautiful topic as usual. Mikey Mike, what is it? Give it to us.
It is a good topic. I don't know if we've actually done this one before, and it is kind of right up your alley, Dan. Today we're going to be talking about different cuts, but not haircuts per se, but we're going to be talking about different cuts on the floor from different machinery. And I guess we've got the luxury of using the grind off the other week that we've got some good photos and some good discussion points about the different cuts from the different machines. Good cuts, bad cuts, is there such a thing, or are they just different and we just need to be a bit wary of them and what cuts our machines are providing so we can actually use them to our benefit and get the whole scenario, the whole grinding and polishing scenario down packed and get in and out of those jobs so we can get on to the next one. So what are the thoughts, guys? What's the thoughts between the different cuts that we saw on the day?
Bad cuts, mullets. A no-go. Definitely not.
I resemble that remark at the moment.
Well, look. Yes, I agree. There's good and bad cuts. I think it's exceptionally interesting because different cuts. You would think they all cut the same. They're all concrete grinder, right? They all cut.
Absolutely. They all spin around.
But interesting what we saw at the grind off. It was just understanding about how the equipment works, seeing what kind of cuts we could see, how the tooling is wearing, and what the machine was doing. Because what will that mean on a daily grinding job, Josh? Like when you don't know what your machine's actually doing?
Yeah, it's quite normal for me to not know what my machine is actually doing. When we talk about cuts, I think that we had the luxury of seeing so many different machines on the day, and we're cutting pretty deep. You know, we're trying to get the most out of them in 15 minutes. So in order to get the most out of them, we're cutting quite deep, pushing that donut. And that gives us a really exaggerated view of how the machine's actually working on the concrete. And I think there's a few takeaways that we've got. We've got a few photos of the different types of machines and the type of cut that they left on the floor. When it comes to the actual the way the machine cuts, we've got in particular the machines that have opposite direction rotation. We know that they typically cut more through the middle in the guts than they do on the edges. The HTC forehead and the 690 were really, really pretty flat all the way up to the edge, and which is pretty interesting because the HTC has the opposite and same direction rotation, which helps it to cut that very flat floor as well, just because of the forehead arrangement too. The 690 had a very square edge to it, and that's really interesting because if you take the platform of the 690 versus the 680, the major difference between those two machines is actually that they've got a much larger disc on the 690, and so that's what's giving us that flatter cut in a 690. I mean, we looked at the Schwamborn machine as well, and that thing was just absolutely mowing away through the concrete, but that's got a pretty deep cut through the middle. And one of the things for me that I find interesting is that when we're looking for a machine, we need to be looking at these types of things as well as to what do I need the machine to do. Now, that machine is very, very popular in the surface prep market, more so than it has been traditionally in the grinding and polishing. And when we're talking about surface prep, it's all about ripping something off and then getting to the next process. So the floor covering or leveling compound going over the top or so. That machine's really, really fast at removing stuff. But I could see that in an application where we're trying to remove tile adhesive or ceramic tile adhesive or even pressure sensitive direct stick carpet and that sort of stuff, that would be really fast, and the depth of the cut would have no bearing on anything because you're not concerned about that. You just need to get that job done as fast as possible. So I can understand why that machine is so popular in that market, in the prep market, because it's actually quite productive. But, it's got that deep cut, which doesn't really matter in surface prep.
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting for the Schwamborn, and it just shows how much the planetary has to play in it too, because it is a counter-rotating machine. Even though it did give us a bit of a bowl cut, it kind of... on one side, it almost cut less than the other side too. So it was a bit of a angled bowl cut because of the planetary direction too. So it just goes to show if you're going to use those type of machines, understanding how the rotation works and how your overlaps are going to be, And I guess the setup of the job is going to be critical too.
No, 100%. And I mentioned that in last week's Tech Talk when we were talking about how much the Schwanborn surprised me, because we do know a few people using Schwanborn, and I was impressed. Like it's I can definitely see that thing operating really well in a surface prep market that just rips off anything that sits on top. Really surprised. And we also saw on the tooling, like Milan said, one side was cutting harder than the other, that the tooling actually wore quite extensively on the outer edge versus other machines, right? Was just good to see. I think it's valuable information for anybody out there using this type of equipment. What will that mean if it's cutting harder on one side and we've got this?
Well, we've been talking about the surface prep and cutting and grinding, and what about when it comes to polishing, guys? What effect can that have? Can different cuts have when it comes that you are going to follow that cut through and move on to polishing?
Yeah, well, when it comes to polishing, it's, we're really just a lot more about RPM. The actual cut and the way that it cuts, whether it's more to the perimeter, more through the guts, is not going to have that much of an influencing factor. Of course, if it's cutting more towards the guts, the same thing applies for when we're our technique for grinding deep. If it's cutting, Milan's bowl cut, to speak Daniel's language, that means that we're going to need to have, wider overlaps to make it flatter. The same thing is going to happen when we go into polishing, particularly when we're doing the honing, the 50, the 100 and 200. We actually will need to, have larger overlaps to accommodate for that. So we might have faster traveling speed, but that also means that we're going to need to have broader overlaps to compensate for the higher activity that's happening in the middle of the machine. With a machine that's going, cutting very flat and wide, that means that we don't need to have as wide of an overlap between in our runs, and so therefore we pick up a bit more, providing that we're travelling at the same wheel speed.
One thing I found interesting on the day, particularly they all have a different cut, but it's not just the cut itself. They leave a different profile, and you're thinking like a 690 versus a 680. The 690 is a heavier machine. You expect the scratch pattern to be very similar, but they were completely different. Yes, they were kind of going in the same direction, but the depth of the actual scratch was a whole lot different. And it was just interesting to see. So guys transitioning from a 680 to a 690, there's going to be a little bit of a teething period, getting used to those scratches and or less profile as well. Because we know the better the profile from the previous tool, the quicker your next tool performs as well. So I thought that was really interesting, and it's interesting to imagine that only the disc size is different. Still all same direction, planetary and a disc. So I was interested to see how much of a difference, and it was quite a noticeable difference.
So that's something that you're saying, Milan, that you would therefore compensate when it comes to tooling. That's how you'd make your compensation between the two different machines. If you were changing from one to another, you've just got that compensation that you can make up when it would come to the tooling, yeah?
Yeah, you might need to run slightly different tooling than what you're used to, but it's also going to be, I guess, at a capacity of how much amps you're going to pull from the machine and what the maximum is. So you can't go, my scratch isn't deep enough, I'm just going to overload it with, zigzags because your machine probably cut out. So we just got to, that's right. So we just got to measure it. But yeah, it might be that you're using different tooling.
It was actually really interesting. Like you mentioned, the actual scratch profile is absolutely not comparable. The other interesting thing was the actual 690 performs in the way it behaves while it's grinding, very similar to a RX6 or an RX8. In the way it's really smooth, really steady. But there was one particular thing, and I looked at your face on the day, Milan. Your hair was a little bit out of place.
I bet you did.
I'm joking. And you weren't happy with the way it was grinding. And obviously, on the day, we were really level, and we set all the machines up with the same tooling, right? Soft 30 singles on every single machine, brand new sets. And there was one thing you would have done differently if you had the choice. What would it have been?
He would have run medium 30 singles because that's what he was actually running on the day.
Oh, like as in like, well, what is your little combo that you would have used? Because it's a 4-head machine. It performs differently. What's your your secret?
So I was also, when the tools were out of the box, it was kind of okay for very little bit. And having 24 medium singles underneath the machine, my power dropped all the way down to like 55%. So I had a whole lot more juice, but I couldn't produce that because of the tool selection. And on the day, we weren't playing around with tooling or anything, but the actual combination I would have used was probably a soft single and a double zigzag to reduce that footprint. Would have given me equivalent to an 18 set or 18 of single medium 30s. So,
and what sort of amps do you reckon you would have got then, Milan?
I didn't open up the cabinet on the HTC machine, but it has a nice little display panel and it gives you a percentage. So I would have been aiming for that 90 to 100%. I wouldn't be going and over 100% because then it goes into overload zone and it's red and then it will cut out on me. But yeah, trying to push it towards that 90% at least.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, I think that was an interesting one, guys. What are the key takeaways here?
Key takeaways is each machine is built for a different purpose. And when you're looking at purchasing a machine, there's so many things to take into consideration. And I think that any contractor will probably vouch for after-sales service is probably going to make the biggest difference. We know as contractors, there's always going to be obstacles in a project. That's pretty much what our industry is. It's problem solving. To know that when you're working night shift and you've got tight time frames, you've got to grind that floor, and then there needs to be a floor covering going down in the same night or whatever it happens to be, whatever's causing that stress. And for whatever reason, the machine isn't running or doing what it needs to do, you need to be able to know that you can pick up the phone, get the answers you need, and keep production going and protect your margin and of course, your business. Because as soon as that machine stops, so does everything else in your business. So I think that's probably the most important thing to most guys. And once you get to the point where you're comparing apples with after sales service, the next thing would be, okay, well, how's this thing actually going to operate on the project for what I do? And as we just discussed, some kinds of technology are going to lend themselves better to cutting deep, but that might not necessarily be one of your requirements, depending on what you're doing.
Well, it's funny because because obviously every machine serves a purpose for depending on what you're looking to do, right? And how you set your business up. What do you want to be known for? Do you want to be the prep grinder? Do you want to be a concrete polisher, a wet polisher of stone? You name it, epoxy, overlays, and you have to purchase the machine to suit that particular field, I would say. And one interesting thing is we had an inquiry to say, hey guys, one thing you didn't test and we want to see is gas machines. So I thought that was interesting. I actually would love to see the latest state-of-the-art gas machine.
Gas prices in Australia are through the roof at the moment. Need somebody to fund it.
I'm not there that day. I'm not available that day. I'm having my hearing tested that day. Can't go.
I was on a project where I see one in live. You know what I loved about it was no leads. I just love the movability of the machine. That I think it was cool. I just would love to see one out there to see how they perform.
It would be good.
So much enthusiasm from the rest of the team, Daniel, should be an indicator.
I think Josh is thinking about the gas bubbles in his beer. He's not too worried about the gas machines.
Yeah, I would love to see a gas machine. There you go. You got it out of me.
I'll happily run it. It's okay. It doesn't matter what the price of gas is. Us hairdressers, we need to be vibrant. We need to be able to adapt because not all customers are the same, guys. Oh my God. Don't be so ridiculous.
If anyone wants to know what Daniel was actually like as a hairdresser, there you go.
I thought that was his weekend persona. We're just about to roll into beers.
Well, I was going to say, you know what gas is for, Daniel? Gas is for barbecues, and you know what goes really well with barbecues?
What's that? Yeah. Cheerio, guys. Was another good one.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Have a lovely weekend.
Have a weekend, guys.
Same. I'm going to go and get some gases from here.